Well, hello everybody. Thank you very much for joining us here today. You are in the right place if you are here for our webinar on the interactive router. So I do have quite a few housekeeping notes for you, so let me get to those right away. First and foremost, I will not have time for a read of the Q&A, so I won't have time afterwards to answer a couple of the questions that have been posted. I plan on using the full hour. I'm going to try to get you here just under the hour. Obviously, I know you have a number of other things you've got to attend to today. Questions panel for your GoToWebinar, a couple of things. If you do have a question or want to pose a question, feel free to do so. I do have one of my colleagues who's going to be monitoring that, and if he can answer those questions, he will certainly do so. But also, feel free to provide comments. You may see something that I glossed over because I'm going to go through a lot of commands over here, and you may say, well, can you go into a little more detail about that? Let us know, because we want to definitely get that type of feedback. And of course, lastly, let us know if there is a feature that I glossed over and you definitely want a webinar or a video saying, hey, it'd be really great if you go into a lot more depth. You're going to find that most of the things I'm going to show in this tool set today are pretty self-explanatory, but there are a few that we really can't go into much detail on just because of the time. Another thing, in your GoToWebinar panel, there is something called downloads. So if you want to follow along with me to some degree, there is this summary sheet that we're providing to you. So what we did was we basically took all of the commands that you're going to see here today, either in the tilde command or in the properties panel, and you're going to be able to kind of follow along. However, I do want to make this caveat: it's not going to be perfectly linear, because I may show something that may have been it may be apropos for me to show it sooner than later in order for me to show you the command that I'm actually in the middle of at that point in time. For those who will be watching this as a recording later on, if you want the summary sheet, we'll make that information more available in the description below the video. We normally post these within 24 to 48 hours after the recording on YouTube. All right. What we will specifically be covering here today is the interactive router. These features are applicable to two other interactive routers in Altium Designer. One of them is the interactive differential pair router, and the other one is the interactive multi-routing router. Say that 5 times very quickly. So if you understand what's going on with the interactive router here today, you can easily apply those concepts to the differential pair router and the multi-routing router, because about 75% of those commands are the exact same. Obviously, there's going to be some commands that are going to be different or removed depending on which of those routers you're going to be in. We will not cover the following in the interactive router just because of time. So one of them I will not be able to cover is pin swapping. There are a few features in the interactive router for pin swapping, but in order for me to really talk about pin swapping, I'd want to set up or spend some time in that. That's easily a 15-minute conversation. I won't have the time for that today. There's also the subnet jumper, and this has actually been in Altium Designer since Altium 6, and it's not directly a part of the pin swapping feature set, but it works in conjunction with the pin swapping set. And again, I would rather show the pin swapping set first and then show how the subnet jumper is made use of as a result of the pin swapping. So I won't cover any of the subnet jumping features within the interactive router. And lastly, there are 2 auto route options in the routing mode in the interactive router. You'll see these here in a couple of minutes. I don't want to spend any time on them because, quite frankly, I did play with them a little bit, but at this point in time, either I'm not happy with the results of them, either because I don't understand this, or that it's maybe lacking something that I was expecting Altium to have put in there. So rather than throw shade on this, I'm just not going to talk about these 2 auto route options within the interactive routing. The way I want you to kind of look at this here is that we're not going to get into the power tools. We're going to get into the hand tools here today. And there's a number of other really great tools within Altium Designer, and maybe in the future we can put together a webinar that kind of shows you these things that can gloss things up or change up things or do match length tuning. Those I have no problems doing with in a later time, but right now I'm just going to focus on what I consider to be the hand tools. Now, before we get into this over here, I do have a polling question for you. I'd like to know what Altium Designer version you are using. So we're going to get that poll opened right now. All right, so we've closed the poll over here. So wow, over 50% of you have moved over to Altium Designer 20, and for 19 has still got a good representation And then there's about 13% of you guys who are using, let's say, 80, 18, and prior. The good news that I have for you, though, is that I still believe that if you are using one of the earlier versions, you're going to see that about 85% of what I'm going to show today are in those earlier versions. And of course, you can see some things that they've added in since then as well. We do have one more polling question for you, and then we'll get on to the good stuff. I'd actually like to know why you're here today. We've gotten a very good response, but I'm kind of curious at what angle you're coming at. So we'll put that up here. So we've got that over here. So I didn't expect to have too many new individuals or individuals who have not seen it, but for those who are new or those who are just checking us out or checking out Altium today, we're not necessarily an Altium, we are not an Altium company, we're a separate organization, but know Altium rather well, so we welcome you to the Altium community in a sense. For those who have not made much of the features, it's about 16% of you. I totally get where you're coming from. It's always amazing to me, for example, after 13 years of using Altium Designer, all the things you continue to learn because you always go down the beaten path and you get used to a particular version. They add new things in the version. You don't have time to look at what's new in those versions. And so it's not surprising that we miss those things over time. And then for those who are always discovering a new feature, we have conversations amongst us here at 9.connects all the time on support questions. And there are things that people show me and I didn't even realize that they even existed in there and vice versa. So there's always a lot of little things that they have buried in here, and it's really hard to always grab those all together. But hopefully today you'll get a good overview of the interactive router. That's all I'm going to show for the PowerPoint slides. Let's get into Altium Designer 20. Okay, let's go here. Let's move this away and let's take a look at the screen over here. So just a note on the summary sheet that I've got, that I provided to you if you have downloaded it there. I'll just talk very briefly about the different ways to get into the interactive router. However, when it comes to the panning, to save a little bit of time, I'll leave that one up to you. But auto panning or the panning options that they have are important because ultimately that's going to allow you to traverse through the design as you're using interactive router. All right, there's 6 different ways to get into the interactive router. You can always use the route menu, so it's route interactive routing. You'll also notice on the right side there is the shortcut key, which is Control W. You can also use the shortcut keys that they have here on the top. So if, for example, you use what's underlined for the hotkey, you can follow those paths. So instead of my cursor coming up to the menu comes to the cursor. So I can hit the U key, for example, which is what is underlined here for route. It brings up that menu, and then at that point I can hit the T. So I can use the UT to start the route. And for those who are kind of old school like me, where the route actually used to be a part of the place menu, they had so many things in the place, they decided to put their own route menu out some time ago, but they still kept the sequence, which is the letter P, which is place, and then T, which is track. And so PT, and the only reason I remember that is my initials, but for most people, they may have used it because that's the way it used to be. But this thing called place track also puts you into the interactive router as well. Of course, there is also the icon up here. So there's literally 6 different ways to get into your into the interactive router itself. For our purposes today, I'm going to use the PT because that's the one that's just been basically embedded into my head. Once I'm in there, you can see I have the cross here. And if you want to change that cross to the large cross, you want to put an X in there, you can change those in the preferences as well. Let's start with something. What I want to do is I'm just going to jump in here and I'm going to start to route. So of course, if you put your cursor into the center there, you're going to get an additional little circle onto your cursor to indicate that you're in the center of it. I'm going to click down and let's see what we've got over here. It may say, well, okay, I've seen this 1,000 times already, but there's a few little things that's kind of interesting about this. If I hit the tab key here, this allows my cursor to really kind of move around and show a few things. What this is not only the routing corner style, but it is also what you call an end 45 as opposed to a start 45. And that's kind of important because when we're trying to make bends and twists and turns, knowing about the start and the stop 45 or any of these other things where we have start and stops are going to be really important because that allows us to make smooth traces. So if I hit the pause button over here to continue, we have the space bar, and what the space bar is going to allow us to do is to switch this from an end 45 to a start 45. So by hitting the space bar, you'll now notice, and I'm going to hit my tab key so you can see it, it starts the 45 and then flattens out. So by hitting the space bar, I can switch between these as necessary, and that's a really useful feature. Of course, there are a number of different ways to do routing within Altium, so let's have a little bit of fun with this here. We have our different cornering styles. I'm gonna hit the tab key again, and the tab key allows me to get into the properties without leaving the command. That's another really nice feature about this, is that we can get to almost anything in Altium Designer without having to bail out of the command and get back into the command again. So for example, if I want to go into the menus and even go to the preferences, I can still do it even though I'm in the routing command. Or I can go over here to the properties, and I can even change the layers if I want to as well. While I'm in the pause button here. But what I wanted to show you is what it says, the cornering style. So right now I am in the default here, which is a 45, and it's not going to use any type of arc or curve to it. Also notice in this properties panel, which does pop up when you're in the interactive router, it's got all of the commands that are possible here on the right side. So you can see that Shift plus space is going to allow me to switch between these without having to constantly hit the pause and going back and forth here with my cursor. So let's continue this along here, and I'm going to click up here. Let's zoom this out and push this in. Hopefully you guys are seeing this. I want to keep it zoomed in enough so that you can see it, but zoomed out so I know where I'm kind of driving this. I'm going to do a Shift space bar, and you'll see now that I've now gone to the rounded 45. Okay. And so that's what's going on. So if you see something like this, and this happens quite often, like, well, I really wanted to go up this way, sometimes the easiest thing you can do is just hit your space bar, and then you, because of that start stop, it's a little easier to control it by just hitting the space bar to do these type of things. And that's kind of what we're doing. Now, what if I don't like the tracks that I'm putting down? We can always hit the backspace, and it will always backspace me back here. There's a feature that they've added in very recently. I don't know if I really like it or not, but what it does is that instead of me having to hit the backspace to get rid of that segment, if I bring my cursor backwards and follow along that trace, it will remove it. And it works pretty good, but sometimes it's a little aggressive, and you can see it has to memorize what it did before. But at the same time, if I keep myself on this over here, it'll bring it back down. So if I, let's say for instance, I go back to the straight trace here and I click down, it will have forgotten what I did over here before, and I can continue along with it. So those are the two ways you can back off on it. Either you can hit the backspace button, or you can basically crawl back on top of the line that you have drawn down. Now, once I've clicked off of this, so by the way, every time I put down a segment, and you'll see that it's becoming a solid color, I am using the left mouse button. And a lot of us have probably not put two and two together, but that left mouse button is also an enter key. So I can hit the enter key on my keyboard. So if I hit my enter key, it will also enter this in as well. But the right mouse button is actually the escape key. So if I want to finish this off, I hit the right mouse button, which escapes me out. Well, guess what? If I also use the escape key on my keyboard, some of us use the mouse quite a bit. Some of us use the interaction between the keyboard and the mouse. So if you're used to using the mouse, you can, the keyboard, then you can hit the escape key and it will do the same thing. By the way, once you've done that and you continue this along, if I try to back off on this like I was doing before, it's no longer going to do. It's already been committed once I escape out. So here I can place this down, I can go back on it. But once I basically commit it down, and let's go over here and just continue this little weird route. There's a reason I'm doing this little weird route, and you'll see here in a bit. But once I've done this here and I right-clicked off and I start this again, I cannot remove it through the backspace or by trying to backtrack onto it. So there we go. What other features do we have here? So that's the rounded 45. Let's do a shift space bar again. Now I'm at the orthogonal. It's just an orthogonal 90. And if we kind of go around here again, and again, the reason I'm just doing this is I have a little bit of clearance to work with. I'm going to now do a shift space bar again, and I'm going to do the rounded 90. And then the last one I'm going to do is a shift space bar for the any angle. And this one's kind of an interesting one because it does allow you to do any angle. But there is also some features in here that will change the way that this looks. Now, right now, the reason I'm allowed to do these angles like this is because the glossing has been turned off. And this is one of those examples where I want to actually jump into another thought here because it's kind of an important one to realize. I'm going to right click to end this. I'm going to hit the tab key so we can jump over here. What is this thing called glossing? Because it's been around for quite a while in Altium. It drives people nuts when they've done their match length tuning, and then all of a sudden Altium tries to clean it up. So what is Altium trying to do with the glossing effort? It's really trying to do two things. First and foremost, it's trying to reduce the number of segments. And secondly, it's also trying to give you the shortest path possible. So when we start doing some routing, you're going to see some examples of this if I leave this off over here. But if it is on, it will also impact the way I am doing things like this over here. So I'm actually going to turn this on to strong, and I'm going to escape out so that I can continue with this route. And the reason why is what you're going to see here. In fact, you already can see this, but I'll draw this out to exaggerate it, is that if I start to try to do the zigzag, it won't allow me to do sharp corners. You may notice that. It's not allowing me to do that. I'm going to hit the tab key so you can see it. Over here, it is forcing me to actually miter this. In fact, I'm not mitering, it's automatically mitering it for me. And I can control this miter, and that is done in this properties panel under this thing called the miter ratio. And if you have this turned on to strong, if you're in one where you're not doing curve, it's going to follow the miter ratio. If you're doing one in which is curved, like either the rounded orthogonal or the rounded 45, then it's going to follow the min arc ratio over here. And this ratio is basically 1x the thickness of your trace. And that you can kind of see this over here. So the thickness of this one, I believe is, in fact, we see it up here, is 20 mils. So they're actually kind of trying to leave a 20 mil gap over here when I'm doing it. So I won't be able to get these sharp points by default. And it will have an impact when I'm routing a little bit later on. So that's why I'm going to put these down over here so you can see the difference when we start playing with the different routing options. And I think we'll just end at that point. And I'm going to hit the right click again, and I'm now actually out of the command. So unfortunately, in order for me to see that command or to work in the properties panel, I do have to be in the interactive router. So just keep that in mind. So let's hit the PT again. Now that we've kind of gone through the different cornering styles, let's take a look at what's in the tilde key. So far, everything I've shown you has been done through me just doing mouse clicks or me going to the properties panel. Well, let's take a look at the tilde key. So let's hit the tilde key. This is the key that's just below your escape. It also houses the same or represents the same one called the back tick. And by the way, the back tick, just as kind of a more little anecdotal point here, is primarily used in databases because nobody would ever really use the backtick in any of its writing. You'd use a single quote. So it allows to be used as a delimiter. So that's why they've got it here. But nevertheless, I am going to hit the tilde key. I don't have to hold down my shift key to do it. And it brings up a whole plethora of all these wonderful commands that we have here. And oddly enough, we've gone through quite a few of them already. You've seen them. So you've seen the tab key that allows me to basically pause or escape out of the command so I can go into the properties or into the layers or into the menus. You also see that there is the suspend, which is the escape key as well. We've talked about the commit, and so this is your left mouse button or your enter key. Of course, with the suspend too, by the way, that's your right mouse button. We've also talked briefly about the backspace as well. I want to talk a moment about the F1 key. So if I click, by the way, I can click on any one of these things and it will do it. So if I clicked on the tab one, it now puts me into the tab here, but it does not return me back to the tilde once I continue from turning off the pause. So I'm gonna hit the tilde key again. The F1, by the way, is kind of an interesting creature. If I click into it, all it does is it just basically gives me the same shortcut keys we see already in the tilde key. I played around with this a little bit. I haven't found much about it. There's no way for me to do like a shift and to select these and to dump them into an Excel sheet or into some type of Word table. So, but it's there. But to be perfectly honest with you, just hitting the tilde key, you see all of the shortcut commands here anyway. So it's a little bit of an odd feature to have in here. Though the F1 key is very useful if you're in the middle of something like a route where you are interacting with the editor because it's waiting for you to draw something on there. You can hit the F1 key and it will bring up your browser along with some information about what you're trying to do. Now it works in some cases, it won't work in other cases. So for example, if I hit the space bar to flip from a start 45 to an end 45, for example, because that command is executed immediately, the F1 key may not necessarily work for you in that particular instance. However, that's what we've got over here. But let's take a look at some of these other ones. So there's also this next one here that's called autocomplete segments to target. And this is the famous control click one. And let's take a look at that. So what this one will do is if I'm in a reasonable proximity of being able to get this up to its target point, I can simply hold down my control key, left mouse click it, and it will finish it here. But it has to be within a reasonable feature. If it's going to have to go through a minefield of V is probably not going to work as well. You'll get a little chime from your machine saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to figure this out. So that's what this does. But very easy feature to use here. Probably the most, I'll say, auto feature of the interactive routing features that I'm willing to show here. So here's the control, left mouse click. So here's an example where it didn't like it. It wants a little more visibility. So I'll bring it over here and then I'll do a left mouse click and now I was able to complete it. So there was a good example of where it didn't want to finish that here. Let's start this again so that we can get the tilde menu up. Let's hit our tilde menu. And here's another feature. It's really kind of an interesting one. It's one that you can toggle on and off. It is called the look ahead mode. It's by hitting the 1 on your alphanumeric keypad. So what is this doing over here? Let me jump in and to start a route so you can see this. So by default, when we start a route, you always have the hashed lines. And if I left mouse click it or hit the enter key, it's going to commit it. And then we start off with another set of lines. And I am in the anyone. Let me do this. I'm going to backspace this out. I'm going to do a shift space bar so I'm in. There we go. This will work a little better for me. So if I click this down here, you'll notice that the solid part, of course, if I move my cursor back, it turns it back into the hashed part. But you have the solid part, which is pretty much committed, and then you have your proposed part here. Well, if you hit the 1 key, it actually now gives you a hollowed part as well. And let me hit the tab key to tell you kind of what this means. So I have the hashed here and I have the hollowed part here. So this kind of gives me an angle or direction where I want to go. But if I hit the left mouse button or I hit the enter key, this part here will now become committed. And this part here, which is hollow, will become hashed. And then a new hollow piece will come out. So if I don't use the 1 key, everything that I show here will be committed. Whereas here, it will do what I'll call the prior segment will be committed. So if I go here and I click down, you can see now that the prior segment's been committed. If I click again, the prior segment's been committed, and so on and so forth. If you don't like the feature, you can always hit the 1 key and then you can come back. Of course, if I click again, both segments are now committed. So hopefully that makes some sense here. Let's go into our tilde key again, see what else we've got here. We did talk about toggling the elbow style. That again is if you want to do a start 45 or start 90 versus an end 45 or an end 90. Here's our cornering style, which we talked about earlier. Let's get into the routing mode. This one's always a fun one. So I'm going to bail out here because I want to start this route over here. So when we're going to do some type of route, we have the ability to have Altium assist us in certain ways. So let's start off with this one over here. So I'm going to start the route. I'm going to hit the tab key and I'm going to jump over into our panel here. And let's take a look. So we have the routing mode, and I'm going to click on this so you can see all of them. As I mentioned earlier at the very beginning, I'm not going to talk about these two because I don't think I'll give them fair justice, but I am going to talk about the rest of these here. So I'm going to start off with ignore obstacles, and we'll take it from there. So ignore obstacles is an interesting one because it allows me to just kind of blow through all of my nets here and create DRCs and stuff. There's probably a feature purpose for this, but obviously for routing, this would probably not be the best way to take care of things like that. So, but this is what this one does. If I want to change the routing mode without basically having to hit the tab key and go back and forth between the properties, I can do a Shift R, and that's what I'm going to do here. So I've now moved to Shift R. This is called the walkaround, okay? And this is where the walkaround is interesting. Remember I talked about the glossing over here? Well, first and foremost, the walkaround will not try to push anything. So this is really important for those who are doing match length tuning. They may have already match length tuned things. It's going to try to walk around it, but it's not going to try to push it. Also, depending on what you've done with the glossing effort, you can see over here as I'm pushing this along, I'm going to hit the tab key. Notice that it was kind of trying to sniff along over here, but it ultimately ended giving me this straight line. So again, going back to what I said about the glossing effort, it's trying to minimize the number of segments and trying to give you the shortest path possible. So what happens if we turn off the gloss? Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do a Shift Control G, and then you can see that's the command there in the properties. So Shift Control G, and I'm going to switch it to off. And now you can see that it's really kind of trying to figure out how to make this work. Okay, so it still did a pretty good job of it, but if I click over here, it's going to follow a lot closer. Whereas if I turn on the strong gloss, it would not really allow me to do any of what things that I'm doing here. So that's just another good example of showing the difference between not having the gloss to having a strong gloss here. All right, what I'm going to do is I am going to do a Shift Control G again, and I'm going to go back to strong just to demonstrate these other features here. So this was the walk around. So the summary of it is it's going to try to walk around it. It's not going to try to push things, and it will get there. So let's do that. As a matter of fact, I'm going to click down here, commit this. I'm going to hold down my Control key, left mouse click, and it was able to finish it. And I'm kind of glad that it put this little weird thing in here because I'll talk about another feature, which is the loop removal here in a few minutes. So that is the mess that I have over here. Well, what about if I want to route this one? And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to do the Shift R again. And now I'm going to do push obstacles. So this one over here is going to try to figure out how to push it. The only thing is sometimes you get caught in an area that, and you got to be a little bit careful because of things over here. And I may have actually created a pretty good booby trap of this one. But the intention that I was trying to do here was to actually have it snake through. And what I'll do here for a moment is I'm going to remove this here just so that I can see if I can get it to pass through that. So let's see if we can do it. But you can see that's the intention of this here, is to try to feed it through. As a fact, I'll click these down to commit them so that I can do this. But that's what it's doing. It's trying to push it. Okay? And that's and it will keep pushing as long as it's not going to violate. In fact, you can see over here it's pushing this to the other side of this obstacle, which is fine as well. So that's good. We'll keep this moving over here, and then we'll bring this up here, and then we'll do our Control left mouse click, and we'll finish this up. So again, these are pretty sloppy. I would obviously I'd expect that you would probably want to bring this in closer, make sure it goes where you want it to go. But for purposes of just this demonstration, you can see that it works. Though obviously you want to do this with a little more care and caution. Let's do one more here. And so this one is going to be the Shift R, and we're going to now do hug and push. So hug and push, what this one is trying to do is it's going to try to hug things, but if it can't hug it, it's going to push it. So unlike the other one where it's just going to push everything, this one would actually try to follow things before it finally pushes things. That's what you're kind of seeing here. So it's trying to balance out that push and that hug, but push comes to shove, it's going to actually push it. So that's kind of what's going on here, but it is really trying to feel it. You feel it's hard to see as opposed to seeing something that's on your, it's one thing to see it on a screen. It's another thing when you're actually doing this with the mouse, because on the mouse you can get the feel for how this is trying to do it. But here's a good example here where it is trying to follow, but if it can't follow it, it's going to push it because I'm forcing it to be pushed in there. And that's what this one is doing. The last one that they've got in here that's of note, I'll do a Shift R again. This is stop at first obstacle. So this one's not even going to try to propose anything. It's not going to push anything. It's just trying to simply figure out where it is. And if it's really going to stop at the first obstacle, it's not going to try to bring me around here. So I would have to click down first before I started going on to a different path. Okay, so it's really rudimentary at this point. And here, because it can't make it through because of the clearances, that's why it's not allowing me to go any further with it. But that's what this one does. Just another note about this. Actually, let me go back into this, and I'm going to hit the Tab key. You'll notice that there is something in here that says allow via pushing. So I haven't talked about the vias yet because I didn't want to confuse those things. I just wanted to talk about the traces. But if there was a via in here and you want to be able, the hug and push will definitely push the vias if you allow it to push it. If you don't want the vias to be pushed, then you got to turn this one off. So just take note of that one there. Okay, so we took a look at the router in a very short order here, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what you can do with it. Let's hit our tilde key and take a look at a few other things. We took a look at the routing mode, and there's another one here called the toggle loop removal. So this one will actually remove loops. And this is a kind of a neat feature because people use this one quite often for two purposes. One of them is just because they got something that they really didn't like here. So for example, if I want to do this trace, because the loop removal is on, when I click down here, it's going to remove this other piece. So a lot of people use this for trimming purposes, which makes a whole lot of sense to do. So they can do this here and they can click in there and it removes the rest of the loop. The other thing that's useful for too is that there's this thing called remove net antennas. So if, for example, I'm going to take this down over here. Let's say I started over here and I start routing down, and then I said, oh, you know what? I don't really want that over here. I'm going to continue to route this instead. After I right mouse click, you'll notice that the other one disappeared over here. Now, if later on, let's say, for instance, now I continue the route again, it should still do this. Once I right click down here, the other one should get removed. Okay, so that's how this is going to work. Now, if I don't want it to remove the boxes, then what I can do is I can go into pardon me, when I say boxes, I'm talking about loops. If I don't want to remove the antennas or the loops, then let's go back in and start this route again and hit the tilde key. And what you're going to see over here is there is this thing called toggle loop removal. By the way, I was doing the Shift D. For some reason, I'm not getting the hotkey to work appropriately, so it's been working better when I go into the tilde key. I'm going to turn this off, and now this will actually allow me to create loops if I want to. So if I'm purposely trying to create loops, it does work. But there's a little caveat to this. So what that is that you'll notice that if I'm trying to create it here on the fly as I'm going through, it just reverses back to itself, so it won't allow me to do that. But if I still want to create this loop, what I would do is I would left mouse click to accept this. I would right mouse click here to end this loop here. Then I would continue it again, and then it will allow me to do it. So again, as long as that loop removal is not turned, I can do it. Plus the same thing with antennas as well. So I can get away with doing an antenna if I want to do an antenna. So that's what that does. And of course, if I want to turn it on again afterwards, then I can go back into tilde key and toggle it back on. So here we go here, and if I want to, I can say, all right, I want to turn this back on. There is my toggle loop removal, and now it's been enabled again. And by the way, once it's been enabled, now that I've done this, if I go over here and I click into this here, let's change this. So again, shift space bar, I'm gonna make this orthogonal, and I click into this here, it will now remove this piece. So just be careful that when you had it off, you're able to do this. When you have it on here, it's gonna reduce it. So that's just a little point to note here. Okay, so what other goodies do we have? Let's go over here into our tilde key. Talked about this one here. This is show clearance boundary.
Paul, can I jump in real quick?
Yes.
One thing a lot of people complain about loop removal, you're actually able to turn that off on a net by net basis. So if you have a net like a ground where you really want to keep it no matter what happens, if you right click on the net in the properties, you can turn off loop removal for just that net.
Oh, you can. Okay, let me try to do that really quick. So if I go over here into its properties.
Yeah, I believe it is.
Okay.
For the net.
And the net removal here. Okay. I would have to take a little bit of a look for that, but thanks, Tom. If you could put something a little bit together for everybody in the comment panel there, that would be awesome. Thank you.
I'll do that. Okay.
Let me do this here just to keep it moving. So I'm going to continue with the PT, and so what I was going to show here was the Control W key. So the Control W key basically turns on all of your it turns on basically your clearance rules. So it shows you where you are within your clearances. So you can make use of that here if you want to turn that on. Now, if you don't want to see everything, because this could be kind of daunting, you can also kind of zoom it into a minimal area here. So let me hit the tab key for a moment, and let me go into this part of the properties, and you'll see something that says reduce clearance display area. And I don't know how well you're going to see this here, but when I go into this, and I'm going to try to zoom in as close as I can, what it's doing is it's actually showing me a very regionalized area where the clearance is based on where my cursor is. And what there is there's actually this very faint gray over the dark black background. So if it's coming through, I hope you can see it. If not, it is there. Just unfortunately, it may not be rendering it so that you can see it. And so I do hope that you are seeing that here. But it just kind of keeps it local so you don't have to look at all of these glaring boundaries that they've set up there using the other command there. So to do this, I'm gonna hit the tab key and I'll turn this off, and we can see this again. So that's the default here. If I don't want it, I can always do a Control W and I can turn that off. Let's take a look again here at our menu here. So there is a follow mode. This is an interesting mode that you can use. So if you want to actually just follow a trace almost blindly, where you really don't have to be too cautious as to where you put in the cursor, you can certainly do this. But let me zoom out, make sure I've got a good place to do this. In fact, what I'm gonna do here is I will start the route here, even though it's not associated with a route. And let's try that again. Okay, so we'll start this here. I'm gonna hit the tilde key, and then I'm gonna start doing the follow mode. So let's go over here to control what would be Control F. And then what it'll do is it'll just literally follow what it's got. And I'm not really doing a whole lot of control other than using the cursor to pan me so I can see it. And it's just following along all the way. And by the way, it'll even try to wrap around and try to continue down this way if it was just out there on its own. So there it is. So that's what the follow mode is trying to do there. So a really useful feature when you're trying to get some lines out there that you just want them to follow those and you don't want to have to be super specific as to when you're going to make those turns. So a neat feature that they've got in there. All right, let's start another route. I'll start over here and let's hit our tilde key again. All right, we start getting into, we're going to talk about the vias here in just a moment. So I wish they put the shift via and the 4 down here because this whole area here talks about vias. But the two other things I'll talk about the trace before we get there is the shift W and the 3 key. So what the 3 key does is it allows you to toggle between your min, max, and your preferred. Right now we are on our max. So what we'll do here is I'm going to hit the 3 key, and you'll see now I'm at the min. And so here's the preferred. And if I hit this again, we're at max. If I hit this again, we're about down to min. So it's kind of weird because sometimes it'll actually not toggle all the way through. It'll go up and down the list from max preferred min, then from min to preferred max, and other times it toggles through. So I'm not sure why I'm getting different responses by that, but nevertheless, if you hit these 3 keys, you'll get to one of your features based on the rule for that particular net. Okay, so that's what you're seeing over here. The other thing that you can hit too is a shift, shift W. And this gives you, so it's not, the control W gives you the boundaries, which I showed a few minutes ago. The shift W gives you this features to choose a different width. And it will allow you to choose widths that are, by the way, not necessarily within the rule itself. So they give you these predefined list of things. So if you had something like, for example, you wanted a 12 mil, though we have like a 10 and a 20, then you can do that here. What it won't allow you to do, in a sense, is to pick one. It'll let you pick it, but it won't allow you to do it because if it'll create a DRC, it won't allow you to pick it. So for example, the max rule that I have here is 20 mils. So if I pick 100 mils here, it will allow me to pick it, but over here, it is only going to show me a 20 mil line. Okay, so that's what this is going to do. It didn't put the 100 mil out there because it would violate it. So this feature is pretty useful, but just again, it's not going to let you violate. So if you pick something that's going to be bigger than your rule, you have to go into your rule and fix it. By the way, since we're here, might as well show this to you. If you need to get your rule, you can do it 2 ways. Once you've paused out by hitting the tab key, you can go into your design, create your rules. A faster way to do it is to go into the properties panel, and then all of your width rules and all your via rules would be listed over here. In this case, I only have 1 via rule and I have only 1 width rule for all my nets. But if I click in it, I can make those changes for that particular rule and continue on. So that's the feature, what that's doing here. So those are the 2 features that we've got. Now, let us get on to the vias. So let's go over here. This is always a fun webinar because I just make a hash out of everything. So here we go. We're going to start with this here. And I am going to hit the, I'm happy with this. We'll stay with this. Now let's see what we've got. I'm going to hit the tilde key. So let's talk about the vias. And there's a number of ways to do the vias. However, the one thing that's a little bit frustrating about the vias is that there is the numeric keypad and there's the alphanumeric keypad. And you'll see this little thing that they say num over here. That means the numeric keypad. So for example, if I was at the plus sign that is associated with the equal sign, then that's it's not going to work. I have to use the plus sign that's a part of the numeric keypad. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to use that. The same thing for this asterisk. There's an asterisk in the numeric keypad, which is also above the number 8 on the alphanumeric keypad. It won't work on the alphanumeric keypad. So I've got to be careful about those. But just to demonstrate the positive, so by the way, the plus and the asterisk do the exact same thing. And the minus also does it, but you'll see how these work here in just a moment. But these are the primary ways that most people will try to initiate a via. There's also the shift control click, which I'll show here in just a moment, which is not even listed here, but it's one that's been around for a long time. So if I want to drop a via, I can hit the plus key. And again, this plus key is on the numeric keypad. And if you don't mind here, guys, I'm going to make this one a little bit bigger. That was the 4 key. I'll talk about that one in a moment. But let's start off with this over here. And you'll notice that it's trying to put down it's in this case trying to put down a blind via here. And so once I've clicked on that, I can jump down over here. If I hit my plus key again, it's going to allow me to jump down to the next layer. If I hit my plus key again, it's allowing me to go to the last layer. If I hit the plus key again, it will wrap me around to the top. Now, what about, and if I hit the plus key one more time, the only reason I'm doing this is I want to show you the minus key. So if I, let's say I do this, now I'm on what's called layer 3. Let's say I want to go upward with this, and I get the minus key, and this will start bringing me upward. Let's swing this around here. And if I have the minus key again, it starts bringing me up here as well. So that's what I'm doing, is the plus and minus keys allow me to traverse through the different layers. Now, what if let's see what other things before, I don't want to jump the gun here. Yeah, let's talk about this. Let's say I've got 20 layers. Do I want to mash the plus key or the minus key X number of times to go from one place to the other? I don't have to do that. So if I'm over here and I want to go to another layer, I can do a Control L, and you'll see that it brings up all my layers that I have here. I have a 4-layer board. So if I want to jump down to 3, I click on that, it will put this down, and now I'm on 3. So that is the Control L key, and it just allows me to go where I need to go. Now, another feature that's in here is just the L key. The L key is a little tricky because if I commit this piece here already, the L key will not work. In fact, it complains. So in order for me to use the L key is that once I have dropped down a via, now I can use the L key, and the L key will allow me to flip through. It basically toggles me through all the layers. So hopefully you can see that here. I'm just hitting the L key. But once I've committed to that layer and click down, the L key is no longer going to do anything until I get another via provided. So I just mentioned a few moments ago, there's a classic way of adding a via if you don't have the numeric keypad. This is by holding down the Control, Shift, and the scroll button on your mouse. And if you push it forward, you're going to get one direction. If you push it backwards, you're going to get another direction on this over here. So it's kind of like the plus and the minus keys of your alphanumeric pad. So all I'm doing here is I'm just gingerly touching my scroll button here to kind of zoom in, to not zoom in this case, but to change either forward or backwards on the layer that I am on. So there we go. Now, you may have noticed that some of these look like poker chips, and that's because I set up 2 blind vias. Pardon me, they're 2 blind vias, one of them from 1, 2, and the other one's from 3, 4. So the question that you may have in the back of your head is, what if I don't want to use those? And what if I have multiple options to go between one layer to the next? Well, we can do that. So I'm going to hit my tab key, and what I'm going to bring up is the layer stack manager. So I'm going to show you what I've got over here. And once this comes up here, we'll get this for you. Well, yeah, there we go. There we go. So let's do this. So let's click on the via types in the bottom. So I do have a through hole that you're always going to get this by default. And then I do have a blind from 1 to 2, and I've got a blind from 3 to 4. So with that in mind, let's go back over here and continue our route. And let's go here and we'll hit that there. So let's say, for instance, I want to go from 4 to 3. So I could hit my minus key over here, but I don't want to use the poker chip or basically the blind via. That's why I call it the poker chip, because it has the 2 colors. But let's say I don't want to use that. So another feature I've got is the 6 key, and the 6 key will allow me to switch between the 2. So if I click over here, now I'm on layer 3. If I do, by the way, hit the minus key again, I won't have any options. If I hit the 6 key, there's no option, because basically I told it that I want to go from layer 3 to layer 2, and the only option I've got for layer 3 to layer 2 is the through hole. So it won't show me a list of things or flip between if I don't have it. However, from 2 to 1, I do have 2 options. So if I hit the plus key again, I can hit the 6 key. Actually, I'm sorry, let me take that back. And there we go. I hit the plus key. I should have done the minus key because I'm going upward. And I hit the 6 key, and it allows me to switch them too. There's also the 8 key. So if you have a bunch of different ones, then they'll give you a menu that you can select from. So the 6 key allows you to toggle through the options. The 8 key will allow you to select it from a menu. So that's what we've got here. What are the cool features? There's actually a couple of them that are kind of interesting over here. So we talked about these. The next one is what's called add Fanout Via and Suspend. But there's a little caveat over here. This is not just the / that's associated with the question mark. That one won't work. You have to use the one that's on a numeric keypad. So Altium needs to put in the little word num in there here. But let's take a look at that. So let me swing this around the bend here. We can take a look. Okay, so if I hit the / key, it will drop this down, and it will allow me to move it where I want to. But once I placed it, it's done. It's moved my cursor. There's no trace that's following this along. So that is what the Fanout and Suspend does. Let's go back over here. Got to start the route again for that to happen. And another one that's kind of useful, especially if you're dropping, you want to stay on the same layer, but you're dropping vias, say for power purposes, then if you go over here, it's called add via no layer change, and that's the number 2. So I did click on it here. There we go. There's that. And if I hit the 2 key, and so I can drop these things all day long, and I'm going to still stay on the exact same layer. So that's what we've got on that one. Let's hit our space bar so we can flip that properly. And let's see, make sure we covered all of these here. We just saw that one. We talked about the 6 and the 8 to transition. So these are the ones if you have multiple options to go from one layer to another. And those are the ones for the via. So let's talk about the next routing target. This one took me a little while to figure out, but the way this one works is that you have to have something that's going to multiple locations. So here's one where this particular signal from P1 to P4 to P3 to P2 are going from different locations. I'm going to start the route here, but you'll notice that what I've got here is this little rubber band that's kind of following me along. So let me hit the tab key to show what I mean. You'll notice that this little line here is actually following along wherever I put my cursor. And if I was to do a control left mouse click, it will drive it right in. But what I can do here is if I click down to commit this, right click to end it. Did I do the wrong? Yeah, I did. I was expecting it, and then I'm going to escape out and then start it again because I was expecting it to, maybe it just needs to be in closer proximity. Then right click it. There we go. Just had to be in closer proximity. So you'll notice now that this split here. And what the 7 key is trying to do is it's trying to change the target. Right now, if I was to hit the control left mouse click, you would go here because that is where the rubber banding is happening. But if I want to go here, either I can drive it in there or I can hit the 7 key. It now switches its target, and that's what you see here. And by the way, I'm going to come into this kind of in a little bit of an awkward form, and I'll show you why I'm doing this here in just a minute. So I'm going to click on this and end it. Okay? And there's a reason I'll show you why I'm doing this over here, but that's what the transition is doing. Lastly, and let's take this one from here because I think it would make a little more sense. I'm going to show you the 9 key. The 9 key is kind of cool, especially if you're trying to go through a minefield of vias. And what this one will do is that after you've clicked down and placed it, if you hit the 9 key, it will jump you to the other side so you can get started on that side. And again, I'm going to do this like this. You see, I'm putting this a little cockeyed for a reason. And the reason I'm trying to do that here is because I want to show you a feature in the properties. But if I kind of bring this down over here and I hit the 9 key, it jumps me to the other side. So then I'm just hitting the space bar so I can kind of change this out a little bit. And I can keep on going back and forth until I bring these guys together. And there it is. Of course, if you want to make that a little cleaner, as we saw earlier for the loop removal, I could probably go like this and knock that out there and make it look a little cleaner. So those are the things you can do. All right, I think I've covered all of these. Let me check, make sure we got them all here. And add accordions. I do want to talk about this one here. So if you want to start an accordion, you can do so. Here, you'll see now I'm immediately doing the accordion. If I hit the tilde key, it's a whole different menu with a whole bunch of different things that you can do to make these things taller, to make them wider, to make the miters change, and so on and so forth. One thing that's really important is if you do not click to commit this and you hit end accordion, you will not get the accordion that you just set up. So for me to do this, let's click on here. Let's do the tilde key, and let's start the accordion. Okay, so let's just get a little example of an accordion over here. And by the way, you can also change these to rounded as well. And if I hit the tilde key once more here and I say end the accordion, notice that it now kept it because I committed it. So that's what it is. But I do have a polling question for you at this time. I'd like to know if you'd like me to go into a webinar where I talk more about the accordion. So if I can get that here, I'd appreciate that. Very good. So what we'll do here is, it looks like a good portion of you would be interested in it. I don't think I could fill a whole webinar with this, but we may try to do something with match length tuning in accordions are certainly a part of that. So this is good information for future considerations. Okay, so we do have the accordion here. Well, let's see what other goodies we've got. Let's start the route again here. We'll start this one here, and let's hit our tilde key. We talked about, we have not talked about this one. This is toggle length gauge. So you turn this on. So you may have seen this one when you're doing match length tuning, or if you're doing something that's associated with the rule. This one just simply gives you the distance that you've got going on over here. So that all this is doing here for you. So that's kind of a useful feature. And if you don't want that one anymore, you can always do a Shift G again to turn it off. So it's just a toggle. And we also have a glossing, which we talked about earlier. So this is a Shift Control G, and that's associated with what we've also seen in the properties panel as well. As I mentioned at the very beginning, I'm not going to have time here to talk about the subnet swapping or the swap target subnet at this point in time, so I'm not going to talk about those. What I want to do here is make sure we've covered everything in the properties panel. Let me grab another start here so we can get that panel back up, and then we'll hit our tab key. So in the properties panel, when you start a net, here's its net name. If it has a net class, it will bring this up. If you click on the net name, it will bring up the PCB panel. Okay, so that's what this is doing over here, and that's a help. Of course, because I'm in the pause mode, if I want to create a class, I can always go into design class and do this on the fly. So that's another nice feature. Here's your length, and then here's the delay. So the delay, I have not done any bench testing yet to see if how accurate this delay is. In the past, Altium was using equations rather than a 3D field solver. However, I know that they've hired someone in who's been doing this type of thing. So I would have to see how this is working against something like Polar or ICD. So the jury's out on that at this point in time, but there is the delay. There is also this layer here. So if I want to change the layer, I can always do it by starting or initiating a via. And I can always go down here as well and click on this. But if I want to, I can go over here as well and I can change the layer. And you can see that I've got this over here, which reminds me I missed two things I needed to show you about the vias. And one of them is this.
Jump in again real quick.
Yes.
If you look down over there on the properties, you'll see there's a checkbox for automatically remove loops. I think that's based on the net.
Yeah, no, and that's also can Shift D as well. So, and also has to do with the antenna. Yep. So, but let me show something about the via really quick because I forgot to show this in the tilde menu, and I didn't want to miss this one here. There's two different things about the vias that I didn't show here. So similar to the width where you can toggle through the min, max, and preferred, and in the source here as to, well, this is the source of the min, max, preferred. This one just has a bunch of different via size, which I'll show in a minute. That's what these things are doing here as well. So if I go over here and if I hit my 4 key, I think I've already placed that one down here. So let's do this. And then if I hit my 4 key, you'll see that it'll actually toggle through the different vias that I have available. And if I want to see a list of those, I can do a Control V. Shift V, there we go. And so there they are. So this will have the min, max, and preferred, but it will also have any of those that you have like in a via pad library file, or any of them that you've already set up and used already within the design itself. So I don't have that special pad via file here available, so that's what I've got. I can't add anything here, and that's similar to the width one too. I couldn't add anything. I can't click in here and say I want to create one that's 15. It won't work. So that's the other way I can look at that. But that's the way you can change the via size on the fly. Let me go over here and actually we'll hit the tab key. And I know my time's getting short here, so I want to just round this up here pretty quick. There is this thing called the, well, let me drop this to layer 3 or bottom layer. The reason I did this here is because if you have this via and then you pause out, if you show a preview, it will show you the via type that you're using here. So if you don't have that, then it won't show it. But now you're seeing that here. So I'm going to hide the preview. You can see the via diameter size, the via hole size. It will allow you to change these on the fly. Here again is that 4 key I mentioned here just a moment ago. There's also the width. So here's the width of the trace. So you can see the min, max, preferred, but I could type something in here as well. So if I wanted a 15, I could type that in. We've talked about the routing modes, the corner styles, the glossing effort. There is the automatically terminate routing. This one's kind of an important one to note, and this is on by default. What this one would do is that if I was coming into an approach on well, let's do this, it's a little sloppy, but if I came into this approach, well, yeah, it's not going to go in there because it's not a net. Let's take this one here and delete this and delete this. So I delete the whole thing. Yeah, okay, let's start that here. So if I come in here, I'll do this place track, we'll do it this way. And I'm coming in, it's probably because I'm on stop at first obstacle. That's why it's being a little persnickety, but that's fine. We'll go in over here as such. The point I want to make is that when I click into here, it should have terminate terminated the routing, but it may be because I'm not coming in on this as clean as it ought to. So the idea behind this is that once I've come in here and I've finished the route, then it should not continue to have a trace on there thereafter. That's what that means here. Let's go back into here and hit the tab key. So we also have our automatically remove loops. We talked about this, remove net antennas. We talked about this. We talked about the via pushing, the pin swapping again. I actually do have one more poll question for you about the pin swapping. I'd just like to know if you're interested in doing the pin swapping. So let's get that poll going. Okay, interesting. So quite a more, even more so than the accordion as well. Okay, good to know. Thank you. So with this over here, that would be the pin swapping that we can enable or disable. We'll get together possibly another webinar in the future for that. The display clearance boundaries, we've seen this already here, and then shown the length gauge, and we've seen these through the shortcuts. The pad entry stability, this is what I wanted to show you, and you kind of were seeing that here earlier. I said keep an eye out on this. What the pad stability is doing, and let's go back here. There we go. Here's a really good example of this. And right now, it's turned off. And normally you would have it at the midpoint here. What this means is that when you're coming in for an approach, the approach would come into either one of the 90s or at one of the 45s. It would not allow this to happen, where I came in where I'm kind of sort of hitting it, but I'm not hitting it dead center. And so if you have this on max, even if I tried to do this, let's do this. Let's go to max here and let's pause this for a moment, and let's take this piece here and delete this. And let's try to go in here with this being turned on to max. If I start the route again, if I try to come in over here, it's actually trying to pull it. You know what? Let me change the routing method because this is, and there. Okay, let's go with that one. So let's go with this. Let's make the approach. And you're going to see it's trying to come in here. It won't allow me to try anything else. Even if I came in here, you'll see that it's going to come in at a 45 angle. It's not going to allow me to do anything but something from a 90 or 45 point of view. Whereas if it's turned off, it'll allow me to hit it from any approach. And sometimes you need that, and sometimes you absolutely don't want that, but it all depends on how tight the routing is. Okay. And for the other ones over here, let's see, the miter ratio we talked about earlier with the glossing effect. And again, we see our subnet jumper length. I wish I had some time to talk about this today, but I don't have it here. And then lastly, we have our rules, and I've mentioned that here for you. So I do have one last question, polling question for you, and we'll bring that one up right now. Took an hour, showed you a lot of various tool features. Kind of would like to get a little input from you. So if you can take a look at that polling question and and see what we've got there. Okay, so we did finish that up over here. And so a good portion of you learned something, and others, actually with the small percentage of you, it seems like everybody walked away with something here today. So that's great. If you don't mind, I'd like to spend just a moment talking about 9.connects here. You are here for a reason, and the reason you're here is to make most of the Altium Designer's routing features, right? There's a lot of tools there. We just probably covered about 30 plus tools in 1 hour's time. So you may have asked yourself, so okay, you're doing this over here. What's the difference between a training and something you're doing here in the webinar? And the key thing I want to drive home is that we teach the process, not the tool. This is actually kind of a rare exception to us. We don't normally just go through a whole bunch of tools and just show you how they work. If we are teaching a process, or we're doing a training, a formal training, we want to teach you the entire process, not just the tool. Because yes, we can show you all these little knicky-knack things and how they work, but really in a process point of view, we want to make sure that they make sense to get you where you need to go. What about our training services here? We believe that there is quote unquote training and there is training. And again, it's trained by, our instructors are those who have walked a mile in your shoes. We want to walk you through the process. I can't drive this point home enough. It's about the process, not the tool. And to include your needs in the training. As a matter of fact, most of the trainings we do now are trainings that are done on site. And it allows us to really customize the training that we're going to provide and go into areas that we would not be able to go to if we were doing what we call a public training where everybody's being represented. And of course, you can also show us things that you wouldn't want to show in a public training as well because of their confidentiality. So for more information, you can check us out here at 9.connects. So thank you very much for joining us here today. I really do appreciate you coming here. I hope you learned something. and we will see you in our next webinar. Have a great day.